It's just another way. Oh, and well, she didn't.
How much do you do?
So that may be next. Yes, that's a no. That's my advice.
All right, just as a notice to everyone, we do have a board member participating remotely tonight, so we're having to make sure all of our connections are up and operational, and one of those connections is experiencing some technical difficulty, so that's the reason for the delay. We'll get started just as soon as we can. All right, everyone. I apologize for the delay. We're going to call this meeting to order. Good evening. It is Tuesday, September 17th at 5:57 p.m., and we're calling this regular meeting of the Wake County Board of Education to order. I want to welcome those of you at home who are watching via the stream and those of you who have joined us here in person tonight. The Wake County Board of Education meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying out the official business of our school system. The public is cordially invited to attend the board meetings to observe the board as it conducts this official business. Persons who willfully interrupt, disrupt, or cause disturbances at an official meeting may be directed to leave by the presiding officer. Members of the audience should show respect for the speakers by refraining from loud comments or other disruptions. Disruptions by any person or persons of a public meeting will be subject to action in accordance with the General Statute 143-318-17. So the first thing to bring up is that we do have a quorum tonight. We have two members who will be joining us remotely, our Vice Chair, Monica Johnston-Hostler, and Mr. Sam Hershey. And this also requires all of us to conduct all votes by roll call. All right, so for those of us who are able, please stand and we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. So the first item on our meeting agenda is approval of the meeting agenda. At this point, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Swanson, a second from Ms. Mahaffey to adopt the meeting agenda. Any discussion, any debate? If not, all in favor of adoption of the meeting agenda, please signify by saying aye as I call your name, because everything is a roll call vote tonight. So we'll start off with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds. Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler. We're still working through some connection issues. We may not be able to hear her until that gets reset. Mr. Swanson
Aye.
and Ms. Caulfield. All right, adoption of the agenda has been approved. Thank you all. The next item, there were no nays. The next item we have a list of recognition items. The first, academic advancement. We have our 2024 WCPSS Constitution Week proclamation. And we'll be hearing from Mr. Drew Cook presenting. Welcome, Mr. Cook.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Chair Haggerty, Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler, Superintendent Taylor, and board members, we appreciate the opportunity this evening to highlight what I think we can all agree is a critically important topic that is truly foundational to just about every aspect of our daily lives as citizens of the United States and to our work as educators in the Wake County Public School System. As you may know, in 2004, Congress enacted legislation recognizing September 17th, which of course is today, as Constitution and Citizenship Day. This day is intended to commemorate the September 17th, 1787 signing of the United States Constitution. Each educational institution that receives federal funds for a fiscal year is required to provide educational programming about the U.S. Constitution for its students. Though there is no mandate on the use of specific curricula, lesson plans, or activities, each year the Wake County Public School System provides instructional resources that can be used by teachers and schools across the district in support of and alignment with the applicable legislation. In recognition of this important event in American history and its critical importance to our work as educators in helping our students reach their full potential and lead productive lives as citizens, tonight we are requesting approval and signing of the 2024 Wake County Public School System Constitution Week proclamation, which I'll read for the record at this time. By the Wake County Board of Education, Dr. Robert P. Taylor, Superintendent, a proclamation. Whereas September 17th, 2024 marks the 237th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas the Constitution of the United States is the cornerstone of our nation's democracy and embodies the principles of liberty, justice, and equality that have guided our nation since its inception, and whereas North Carolina was one of the 13 original colonies that was represented by three signers of the Constitution, William Blount, Richard Dobbs Speight, and Hugh Williamson. And whereas in 2004, the United States Congress enacted Public Law 108-447, recognizing September 17th as Constitution Day and Citizenship Day, while also requiring that educational institutions that receive federal funding hold educational programs on September 17th to celebrate the Constitution. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. And whereas the observance of Constitution Week serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring significance of our founding document, encouraging citizens across the nation to reflect upon the values enshrined within it and the responsibilities they entail. And whereas the Wake County Public School System recognizes the importance of educating our students about the Constitution's role in shaping our society and fostering an understanding of their civic duties and rights. Therefore, the Wake County Public School System does hereby proclaim September 17th through the 23rd, 2024, as Constitution Week across the district. We encourage all members of our community, educators, students, and families to engage in activities that promote the study and appreciation of our nation's Constitution. Thank you for your support. Chair Haggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. So at this point in time, are there any comments or any questions regarding the proclamation for Mr. Cook? Ms. Caulfield?
I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate that Wake County is actually making this proclamation and emphasizing the importance of this day. And I think it's wonderful, and I hope that every teacher and every student and family enjoys whatever lesson or celebration that they do in their classroom. And thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cook. At this point in time, Dr. Taylor and I will sign the proclamation.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We have the signed proclamation. All right. Next on our agenda, we'll hear from our chief of schools. We have the naming of the Enloe Magnet High School Auditorium featuring Dr. Elena Ashburn, and I see Principal Jordan's in attendance and some other friends, all tied to Enloe High School. So.
Good evening, Superintendent Taylor, Chair Haggerty, Vice Chair Johnson-Hustler, and members of the board. I'm excited to be here this evening to introduce Enloe Magnet High School Principal Dr. Jordan. Dr. Jordan will be sharing details regarding our request for the naming of the auditorium at Enloe after former Enloe teacher Freddie Lee Heath. We will be seeking your approval of this request at the conclusion of her presentation. Thank you.
And this was a surprise that we had to keep under wraps. So I want the medical people to be on standby for Mr. Heath. Dr. Jordan, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Dr. Jacqueline Jordan, the principal of Enloe High School, and I'm here to tell you about my colleague and my friend, Freddie Lee Heath. Freddie has been a guiding light in arts education for nearly 40 years. His motto, "Open the window any way you can," exemplifies his relentless pursuit to make the arts accessible to everyone. Beginning his journey with Wake County in 1992, Freddie inspired students across all grade levels, including students at Enloe, where he served as the leader of our dance department. He recently retired as the district's Director of Arts Education, overseeing 650 arts educators, setting the highest of expectations and helping them be realized by championing equity-based practices which emphasize rigor and relevance. He supported principals, including me, in creating dynamic arts departments by securing much-needed resources, tirelessly mentoring future teacher leaders, and walking with us hand in hand as we help to bring our dreams for our programs to fruition. He worked with individual schools to tap into sustainable funding sources. For example, through his advocacy, the Enloe Arts Guild funds an annual scholarship program extensively supporting 7 vital arts disciplines: dance, theater, chorus, visual arts, orchestra, TV and audio visual production, and piano theory. Most impressively, though the list of responsibilities on Freddie's plate was massive, it never interfered with his attention to detail and his responsiveness at the micro level. For his teachers, students, and principals, he always took the call. He always made time to give advice. He always showed up for the performances or even just gave a hug or a laugh. That sense of humor. How many days did that get us all through? He is simply the best. Freddie's leadership and advocacy of the arts extended beyond school-based programs. His direction of our yearly Pieces of Gold program provided every year a chance for the community to witness firsthand the power of the arts. Every member of the audience was left amazed by the talent of our students and inspired by the work of their teachers, which ensured we would continue to have the support for arts programs and public schools. Freddie was a master at putting together a program that kept us all captivated from curtain to curtain. And who can forget Freddie's dynamic programming every summer for our summer leadership conferences, allowing school and district leaders to step back into their artistic selves as we performed memorable dance numbers that left everyone inspired. It took us all back to the joy and the purpose for the hard work that we do. Through the arts, Freddie helped start our school years off imagining what is possible, of what we're each capable of. Freddie Lee's work on behalf of arts education can also be felt on a state, national, and global level. He was one of the first dance educators in the country to achieve national board certification. Some of his numerous prestigious awards include Dance Teacher Magazine's K-12 National Teacher of the Year and the National Dance Association's K-12 National Teacher of the Year. His passion for the arts has taken him to over 35 state conferences and even international platforms like the National Museum of Dance and the National Dance Company of Armenia. In March of 2023, Freddie was awarded the Order of the Longleaf Pine, one of the most prestigious awards given by the Governor of North Carolina for persons who have demonstrated exemplary service to the state of North Carolina and their communities that is above and beyond the call of duty, and which has made a significant impact and strengthened North Carolina. Suffice to say, Freddie Lee has dedicated his adult life to advocating for the arts and serving students, teachers, and public schools. He is a role model for us all. Naming the Enloe Auditorium in Freddie Lee Heath's honor is a fitting tribute to a leader who is a true example of dedication and commitment. His contributions to our school, our students, and the broader arts community have had a lasting impact. Thank you for considering this request on behalf or from the Enloe Magnet High School community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jordan. So, at this point in time, we're going to, if you looked at our agenda, we're sort of jumping around a little bit. Normally, we have all our information items, then we would have our action items, and then continue on to closed session. But having heard this as an information item, we're going to move immediately to an action item, which is consideration by this board for honoring the request by Enloe Magnet High School for the renaming of the auditorium. And so what I'd like to do at this point in time is entertain any motion. I'd love to make it, but you know that I can't.
So moved.
All right. We have a motion from former Enloe teacher, Mr. Tyler Swanson, and seconded by Ms. Caulfield. The motion is to grant the permission for the renaming requested by Enloe Magnet High School. Are there any comments from board members about the request at this time? Ms. Mahaffey.
I don't know if we can sum into words the scope of all of the lives that you touched, from our students that you taught yourself, from the work that you and Bo did at the head of this department, making sure every teacher felt supported and understood that the arts are a part of the core curriculum here in Wake County Public Schools. I'm just thrilled that it's a theater, that is getting named in your honor. And I just want to leave with this quote from Oscar Wilde. I regard the theater as the greatest of all art forms, the most immediate way in such a human being can share with another the sense of what it is to be a human being. Thank you, Freddie Lee.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Are there other comments by other board members? I know everyone's ready to vote, right? This is amazing. Freddie Lee, both in your role as a teacher, as being so instrumental in building the county's arts program. You have seen this growth and development, not only in students, but then also in the team that you've trained. In the ACC country, we talk about Dean Smith and the coaching tree. And as you know from the governor's proclamation, from the last pieces of gold, there are countless Wake County folk that have been touched directly by your influence as a mentor and by a teacher. And, when it comes right down to it, we could name county buildings after you, but I think there's something very special about naming that auditorium, that theater at Enloe for you. And so I know that I and all of my colleagues are super excited to bestow this honor. And with that, we have to take a roll call vote because we're remote. We can't do it in one fell swoop, but I'll call each board member's name and we'll proceed with the vote. All right? All right. First, we'll call on Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Next, we'll call on Ms. Edmonds.
Aye.
Next, Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
The chair has an enthusiastic vote of aye. Mr. Swanson
Aye.
and Ms. Caulfield.
A very happy aye.
And so, by the unanimous consent, the unanimous approval of this Wake County Board of Education, we have granted the request of Enloe Magnet High School, and we encourage everyone to visit the Freddie Lee Heath Auditorium at Enloe High School. Thank you. Freddie Lee, I'm not going to ask you because I know this was a surprise. I don't know that you have anything prepared, but obviously, anytime you would like the microphone to address this body and this audience, you are more than welcome.
I can't talk right now.
Understood. And this, just to give you the extent of Enloe Arts and Wake County Arts, while we're making this proclamation, I'm getting texts from people all about this, the arts program, and all of your great impact. So please know that you're respected, you're loved, and you'll always be part of this family. So thank you. All right. All right. The next item on our agenda, and I want to confirm, too, we have been joined by Vice Chair Johnson Hostler, who is also participating remotely. So we welcome Vice Chair Johnson Hostler. The next item we have is we're going to return to our information items. And the next information item, I get to recognize myself. This is about the North Carolina School Boards Association annual meeting and the selection of voting delegates. And I wanted to share this with board members in this meeting in preparation for an action item that will come to our next meeting. As you know, our organization is part of our State Association of School Boards, and every year we have an annual conference where we bring all of our school board members together. There's continuing education, professional development, wonderful speakers, but the organization also has a delegate assembly where decisions about the business of the organization are made. And due to recent changes in the constitution of the organization, they are requiring standardization of how each school board member, each member school board, selects their delegates for the delegate assembly. And so I would just encourage all of you between now and the next meeting, please review the materials posted, familiarize yourself with the dates coming up in November for the annual meeting, and if you would like to be nominated to be one of our 4 delegates, our board will vote at that time for 4 individuals. Now, whether or not you are a voting delegate, you can still attend the conference. We could have all 9 members attend, and all 9 members have access to the delegate assembly, but when voting, only the 4 that are selected would have a vote for that purpose. All right? So think on it. If you'd like to share with me ahead of time, we can see how many people are interested. We can have up to 4. I hope that we will have 4. And then if we have more than 4, we would have an election similar to how we elect our other offices, our presiding officers and such. And then we would go through the process that way. All right? Does anyone have any questions about the process or any other suggestions for how we move forward with this? It is a new change, so this will be the first time that we've done this. All right, great, thank you. So we have one final information item tonight. We'd like to bring up our, we've got a team. I think Mr. Carrozza is working on this, David Nieder, Trish Posey, staff from our Chief of Schools office about House Bill 10, which was recently passed by the North Carolina General Assembly, and its potential impacts to WCPSS. This is something that I think we've all been following closely. I know Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler, myself, and the superintendent have been meeting about it several times since the legislature came back into session, and we've asked staff to put together a presentation about its potential impacts known already to us to brief all board members. So we'll get the presentation loaded. Ms. Rory? All right, it looks like it's up. All right. All right, welcome, Mr. Carrozza.
Good evening. Chair Haggerty, Superintendent Taylor, members of the board, sorry. Thank you for having us this evening. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank all North Carolina public school employees, especially those with Wake County Public Schools. As school choice is the driver of the work that I do, I see firsthand all of the amazing things that we do to make the school experience a special one for all students. While we still need time to finally digest the impacts of HB 10, I can assure you that we will be impacted. They say iron sharpens iron. We welcome competition. We just ask that we have a level playing field while we do so. So with that, we are here today to review our current enrollment forecast data. We're going to provide a history of the state change to funding in arrears, and we're going to share what we know so far about HB 10. With that, I'm going to welcome Ms. Marcella Rory, our Senior Director with Long Range Planning, to kick off the Long Range Membership Forecast.
Welcome, Ms. Rory.
Thank you. Are you doing the clicker? Good. Are you doing the clicker? Good evening. Again, thank you so much for allowing us some time to come and speak with you. The image you see on this slide, you've seen a few times as Ms. Pulliam and the Office of Student Assignment has shared what our process is, the 6-step process for managing our growth and crowding throughout the district. Well, step number 1 starts with long-range planning and our annual membership forecast. This is a data-driven process that includes not just staff members with the Wake County Public School System, but I wanted to highlight some of our partners that work as part of this process. We could not do this work without our Wake County municipal planning teams and their planning departments. We also work collaboratively with UNC, Carolina Demography, and Demo Advisors. We also work with NCSU and ITRI, the Institute for Transportation, Research, and Education, and our partners with Wake County government, as well as our Wake County Public School System staff across multiple departments. Doing a forecast is a data-driven process. However, as we've shared with you over the past several years, and most recently iterated this past February, there are challenges to provide to the accuracy of a forecast. So we're going to highlight some of those.
Some of the issues and challenges and unknowns that we've dealt with over the past few years are the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. How fast people are actually going to give birth. So our birth rates are in kindergarten to, birth to kindergarten rates. Our residential migration patterns, and also school choice and legislative changes. As part of our forecast process, annually we review what new data is available. We conduct error analysis. We analyze what trends are happening, not just here in Wake County, but throughout the country, and we adjust it accordingly. For our 2023-24 membership forecast, using the data that was available to us at that time, we forecasted that we would increase by 450 students for the 2024-25 school year, which is roughly an increase of 0.281% of our students. For the next 10 years, we had forecast that Wake County Public School System would increase by just over 12,000 students, or roughly 7.726%. The vast majority of Wake County families have chosen to attend the Wake County Public School System. We continue to forecast that we will educate the majority of school-age children in the Wake County Public School System. Therefore, continued investments in school construction, facility improvements, programmatic classroom enhancements remain vital to attracting over 75% of the families to our district. So let's highlight some of the challenges, or reiterate some of the challenges that we shared with you this past year. Two of those items were the changes in decision-making for charter schools and the new laws for expanding the vouchers for private schools. And all of those items, in addition to the other ones that I mentioned a moment ago, would impact what our forecast ends up being. NC private schools have grown from 471 schools and just over 54,000 students in 1991-92. As of the 2023-24 school year, the North Carolina Department of Administration for Non-Public Education reported there were over 131,000 students enrolled in 881 private schools in North Carolina. Wake County had 91 private schools with just over 22,000 students enrolled. Our forecast team has already kicked off the annual process for the 2024-25 forecast, and our plan is to bring that to you for information in February of 2025. As of now, the changes and fluctuations that are expected in the private school voucher program, assuming it is approved, should settle by October 1st of 2024. If that is passed and that does occur, then we should be able to capture those changes in our PMR2, our Principal's Monthly Report Month 2 numbers, which are baked into the forecast for 2024-25. There are additional unknowns that we simply won't know for quite some time. As you're aware, there are over 55,000 applications for students living in, but we don't know how many of the 55,000 applications are for students that are living in Wake County. We don't know how many of that number of students are already enrolled in private school and are simply seeking additional funds to help support that process. We also don't know how many students are currently enrolled in Wake County Public School System, but may use a voucher as a way to change their enrollment to a private school. But once we get that information, we will bake that into our forecast for this year.
So I just wanted to go back and just share some information with you real quick. There are 131,000 plus students in private school. As of last year, DPI reported that the number of public school students and charter school students was less than 1.6 million students. So if you do the math, you're looking at a less than 10% market share when you're talking about private school. So just consider that as you consider the impacts of what's being given to the voucher system, the overall amount. And with that, I'll turn it over to David Nieder and his team to talk about HB 10 and the funding.
Good evening, Chair Haggerty, members of the board, and Superintendent Taylor. We'd like to cover just two specific topics briefly with you. The first has to do with legislation that was passed a year ago in the long session, and that has to do with funding in arrears, something Ms. Kimsey's going to come up and speak with you about in a minute. And then the second will be the actual House Bill 10 legislation, what we know about it at this point, and the potential fiscal impacts. Ms. Kimsey.
Good evening. So Section 7.2 of House Bill 259 in the Session 2023 law directed the Department of Public Instruction to bring forward a model that would fund public school districts based on their prior year average daily membership, and also to have a contingency fund so that if school systems were to increase in student enrollment, they would be able to address that through the contingency reserve. By directing the Department of Public Instruction to make this change, it would be an advantage for school districts that are declining in student enrollment because it would give them a year to adjust to that if they were funded at their prior year number of students. So I wanted to point out that that was the direction, and that is what the Department of Public Instruction moved forward with. This slide just shows that in their allotment policy manual for this year, it directs that there's an ADM contingency reserve to provide funding to public school units that have a higher current year ADM than the allotted ADM. What is different is if those funds are available in a contingency reserve, they would be allocated if school systems come in with higher student membership. If there's not enough funds, they would use what is in the contingency to do the best they could to address those issues where there's been growth. And it also addresses that the funds would be allocated in a new program code. Historically, if our district grew after our projected enrollment, we would receive adjustments to our allotments in their individual categories. So this is a change that it would be in a new program, but it's something we can manage. That part is not an issue. The next couple of slides are copies of slides that the Department of Public Instruction provided to us at a summer conference, because there is an issue that has come up with this new process. So they shared with us that they were intending to roll out this new formula, and their intent was to distribute initial allotments based on the planning numbers, plus technical adjustments, plus salary increases, and any expansion. And that they had planned to be able to fund each public school unit that has an increase from that contingency reserve. So the department requested funding to be able to do that. Their estimate that they would need to be able to fund growth across the state of North Carolina was $200 million. The House and the Senate agreed to $95 million. And even though when the state rolled out the second year of the biennium budget at the start of this fiscal year, and they directed the Department of Public Instruction to move forward with the model, none of those funds were approved in that at the start of the fiscal year, which is an issue. So this summer, when the state was covering this with us, the department was really struggling. They were having to start looking anywhere they could to find any savings within their own budgets that might be able to address growth once it occurs. So this last slide that they shared with us is that they were going to make adjustments within funds they had, so really looking within their base budgets to see where they might have savings or things that could be used to address it. So it brings us to the current state where One thing that we are good that we see in House Bill 10 is it does include funding, not enough, not based on what the department needed, but it does put the $95 million accessible to be able to fund growth. We don't know the specific impact on our system yet. We have received our initial allotments. Just a few days ago, last week, the department sent to us the basis they used for our allotments, and we're in their process right now of analyzing that. And we won't know how much we have grown until we get to second month average daily membership. So we will be doing these calculations now and up until we know what our growth numbers are to be able to provide an analysis to the superintendent and his team and to you all. But that's where we are right now, knowing we're under a new process, but there's not full funding in place.
Thank you, Ms. Kimsey. Now moving to House Bill 10. House Bill 10 was ratified by the legislature and sent to Governor Cooper on September 11th. And if the bill becomes law, as Ms. Kimsey just mentioned, North Carolina DPI can use these $95 million of funds that are included within the legislation. And on the slide, you see a little cut and paste where that is the amount that is included for a contingency reserve that would be available for growth. Again, noting that the Department of Public Instruction estimated they would require $200 million to fund growth. This is less than half of that. There's another provision in House Bill 10 I haven't seen it written about, and we have not received any feedback from the Department of Public Instruction on what implications it may have for the LEAs. But in addition to providing that additional $95 million of funding to NCDPI, it also eliminates an education enrollment reserve of $65 million that had been in place, and that was in place for both the community college system and also public school enrollment. So I would like to think there's got to be some implication with that. Again, we don't know specifically what. This next slide is also a portion of House Bill 10. It speaks to the increase over the already existing set of increases for the Opportunity Scholarships. And you'll see it goes back to 2017-18 and it goes all the way up to 2031-32. And you can see that beginning this next year, it takes what was already a significant, about a doubling of the amount, and more or less triples the amount year over year, all the way up to, at the end of this schedule, just after 2030, bringing almost $1 billion of public funding for private school funding. Annually, yes, ma'am. So again, House Bill 10 is with the governor at this time. As you know, he has 10 days to either sign it, veto it, and if he does nothing, it will become law. And if it does become law, as Ms. Kimsey referenced, we're going to need North Carolina DPI's interpretation of the legislation as well as their allotment formulas. Until we have that, we truly won't understand the actual implications for the district. And that, Chair Haggerty and board members, is our presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Nieder. I know there's a lot of information. I know some of you have been following it very closely. I know some of the others may have only just been following the headlines. So you may have questions about what we know so far, or you may have opinions that you want to bring to the table at this time. Both are welcome for questions. We'll direct it towards staff. For comments, we'll direct them toward each other and to the public. So we'll start off. Are there questions or comments? We'll start with Ms. Mahaffey.
On this Constitution Day, I want to reference the North Carolina Constitution, Article 9, Section 2, Uniform System of Schools, Part 1. General and uniform system, term. The General Assembly shall provide by taxation and otherwise for a general and uniform system of free, public schools, which shall be maintained at least 9 months in every year, and wherein equal opportunities shall be provided for all students.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Further comments, further questions? Mr. Swanson.
You know, Ms. Mahaffey, I guess we're both two teachers because you were actually in my notes because that's exactly what I was going to say. How befitting it is to have this conversation on Constitutional Day, where yet again this North Carolina General Assembly, which is an illegal constitutional body by gerrymandering districts and diluting the people's voices, yet again giving over $1 billion to our public school, taking billions of dollars from our public schools, which then puts that burden back on the taxpayers, the local taxpayers, to step in the gap time after time after time when we are seeing this body of folks who have a high disregard for public education. It's laughable that that's what they choose to do. And yet again, looking through this, there was no raises for teachers, but yet here we are. So I have a lot that I will say about Constitutional Day in my board remarks, but the only thing I can say in this moment is elections have serious consequences. These folks are on our ballots, and this is a political body, and this is what they're doing is a political statement, so we have to get engaged and really let our voices be known and to support those folks who believe in public education. Because yet again, we're talking about the next generation, the generation of now and tomorrow, our future doctors, our future teachers, our future principals, our folks who are going to make a difference in these communities. Yet again, their education is getting robbed by a bunch of folks who choose to provide welfare to the rich and wealthy. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Additional comments? Ms. Evans?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for raising the election piece. So that's coming up real fast. Absentee ballots are going out soon, finally, I think, after RFK's mess that he pulled. Early voting starts October 17th and will last, 10, 12, 15 days? Thank you. October 17th through November 2nd, and of course, Election Day is November 5th. We do have one member of the Wake County delegation that voted in favor of House Bill 10. You can do your research and find out who that is, and if you're in that district, that is something to consider. Private schools in North Carolina have zero accountability. There are some other states in the country that have private school vouchers that have some accountability. In North Carolina, this is just a couple of examples. Don't have to have any licensed teacher in the building, zero. Don't have one person at a voucher receiving school has to have a background check. One. That's in statute. You all know they don't have to provide, special education services. They don't have to provide school meals. They don't have to provide transportation. And that's not to say that some of them don't. Some of them may provide some of those services. Some of them may decide that they do want licensed teachers in their classrooms. But by state law, there is zero accountability. We are obligated to be very accountable to the voters, to the citizens, to the students. We're obligated to actually teach them something. That is all in statute for us to comply with. And that's where your public dollars should be going, is to public schools. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Anyone else? Ms. Caulfield?
So while I understand that it's a very sensitive topic, I certainly want to be very clear that I support public education. My kids went through public education. My entire family line has gone through public education. But I think the focus for us should be on being their number one choice. The whole idea with the Opportunity Scholarship, for me, from what I understand and from what I hear from families, is that they may not be getting what they need from our public schools. So opening that conversation, listening to them, and providing that extra support is really what I would like us to be mostly focused on. And as far as the generation of tomorrow, every child that goes to school, whether it be public, charter, in our schools, which is where we hope it would be, every single one of those children count, which also means wherever they can get the best education for them. And when we don't receive funds for that specific child, we're also not providing services for that specific child. It follows the backpack. So again, I'm going to keep repeating that I want to make it so that Wake County is actually everybody's number one choice. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, it is a big convenience to be a parent at public school. We get to drop our kids off or they take bus. They have all kinds of scholarship and opportunities that there are some schools that cannot provide it, but we provide it. We give them choice. We have magnet. We have early college. We have so many things that are available for our students. It doesn't mean that it's going to meet each and every person's need. And I want everybody in the public to understand that there is a tier system. This isn't just for it to give money to the rich people. It starts with tier 1, and it starts with all of those families first. It's not a perfect system. We don't have a perfect system, but I would really like us to focus on making it as perfect as we possibly could be to be that choice. I understand it brings us difficulties. It absolutely does. But the things that we're saying here today, it gets me upset because I know that there are children out there that don't fit in our perfect box. And those people, those parents, they are taxpayers. It is their money. They have a right to find alternative if we can't give it to them. But we still should be working 100% to give them whatever it is that they can. It's always going to be a learning, growing thing. So I don't like the fact that the money is going there. I don't like the fact that our families are going to other alternatives. But I still think that it really should be the focus on what can we do better, how can we listen to the parents and the families and the students so that we are their number one choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caulfield. Next, I see Mr. Hershey is online, and he has some comments.
So I'm a little confused about what was just said, because every single day our staff gets up and works their tails off to make us the best that we can be, to provide the best education possible for our students. I do not understand how someone can sit at a public school board and be okay with this amount of private vouchers, which were passed specifically to give money to people with higher incomes. That's what this is. This is not about helping people with lower incomes. This is about people making a significant amount of money at home. And I'm just kind of blown away. Any kind of assertion that our staff is not working 100% to make our schools the best that they can be, I just have to reject that outright at this table. I'm sorry I'm not there in person to do this, but I'm not having that. Our staff works their tails off, and then they get the short end of the stick from the General Assembly. That's what this bill is. And I would love to see us do a resolution opposing vouchers at this point, because I'm extremely frustrated. I'm also going to add that if you just look at the results in other states, this is going to blow a hole in the budget, and then they are going to start looking to cut. And guess where they're going to look at? They are going to look at public education. And we need to be prepared for that. And I want voters and constituents and public school families to all be aware of that, of what is going on in other states, because it is the model and it is not working in other states. This is a giveaway. Everybody knows it. And public education advocates and public education board members should oppose this 100% full stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey. I'll ask if Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler has any comments. All right, and then I just have some comments of my own. You know, we know that we have a diversity of opinion, and we have different people with different views, and we have families with different needs. And there's no disputing that. But we can create good policy, fair and equitable policy, to do things the right way. And I'm so troubled by this legislation because there was an opportunity to do something, no pun, and it was missed. It was really missed. You know, we know that public education in North Carolina is not adequately funded. You know it, I know it, the North Carolina Supreme Court knows it, it's been held as a constitutional fact. And yet, the legislature sits on funds in overly generous reserve funds and making additional appropriations for programs like this. And, who pays? When we don't fund our schools the way they need to be funded, that comes down to every local community, big counties like Wake, smaller counties, rural counties, and either we do without these incredibly valuable, essential government services, or we turn to our other local governments to fund them. That means our counties. And how are the counties paying for them? They're paying for them with a property tax. And so when the state doesn't fund these programs out of its other state revenues, it comes back onto all of us with increased property taxes. And we know that property taxes are regressive. They hit retirees. They hit others. When the state has many more fair, more equitable ways to pay for these essential education expenses. Now, in Wake County, the problems that we're having. We see that our county has stepped in to pay for the funds that we're not getting from the state, but that comes at a cost, and that cost has been we haven't been paying for our capital construction needs. This is what, by the state only giving us $15 an hour for a bus driver, and knowing that bus drivers won't work unless we can get them up to $20 an hour, and as you know, we still have a number of vacancies. The money that we're spending just to keep our buses running is money we can't spend on HVAC systems and mechanics and other crucial needs in our district. But beyond that, if there's an argument to be made for assisting other children with school choice and school choice, it could be done fairly. And this is where I think we have a real missed opportunity here. This is why I would encourage members of the General Assembly. I'm anticipating a veto by the governor. I don't think I have to ask the governor to veto it. I think he's way ahead of me on that. But then I would ask that members of the General Assembly vote to sustain that gubernatorial veto. Because not only is it bad for us here in Wake County, it's bad statewide. It's bad because so many of our small school districts don't even have private school options. Yet their public schools, which are there to serve those communities, are underfunded. So much of this wealth is flowing to the larger counties like you saw. We've got 10% of the private schools here in Wake County, another 10% in Mecklenburg. That's 2 counties sitting on 1/5 of all the private schools. So it's not fair to those other counties. Now, I understand Ms. Caulfield's argument, and I respect it about, you want to make sure that if families have a choice that they have special educational needs. And I'm sympathetic to the idea of families that are in need, financial need, having that opportunity. But one thing that you said was when we have these, and I'm not going to quote you directly, but I think the point was, when we are funding the schools, we need to have funds for the specific children so that children that need money for education are not missed. And I agree with that. But that's exactly what this legislation does. It does not fund all children. And this is the problem. This is when I talk about fairness and equity. This is why we had our staff present some of these budget numbers and some of these policy numbers that I know can get lost sometimes on people. They're not always the most plain, they're not always the most common sense. Our schools are funded based on an average daily membership. That means we do not get money for every student enrolled in Wake County. We only get funds to the schools based on the average attendance in those schools. Whereas all of the students that qualify and get one of these scholarships, they're getting funded. And the level of that funding, now it is variable, there is a wealth indicator, but at the top, students can get $7,000 per student for their private school education, whereas in Wake County, we're like 110th out of 115 school districts in the amount of money we get for students. And we have many more state requirements for the services that we have to provide that are required by the state that those students, those private schools, don't have to provide. So it's more expensive for us to provide an education for these children based on the requirements put forward by the state, but they'll give more money to the private school students per student than they will for us. And that's just not fair. That's not good policy. There's been no money set aside for this transition. There's been no money set aside to bridge the state public schools for the transition that you heard Ms. Rory and others talk about in terms of projections to enrollment. And it seems like if you wanted to do this, there could have been a better way. And maybe they can bring it back up in January when they come back into session. Maybe there's a way to reform this. But what is passed, it doesn't fund all students. It doesn't fund all students in Wake County. They say they'll give us $95 million for enrollment growth, but they're going to take $60 million away in the other growth fund, and that's for the entire state. That's not for Wake County. That's for the entire state of North Carolina and the changes in enrollment. So I really appreciate staff coming together, working very quickly, trying to put these projections together for us, because I want us to have accurate information. I want us to be able to tell families about these changes. And again, we can have different opinions on what we should do, but I want us to be able to accurately reflect what the bill will do. So I appreciate it, staff. I thank you for the information item, and board will continue to get more information in terms of the impact on enrollment and the impact on our budget. Mr. Nieder, if there are adjustments, I'm sure you and your team can calculate those and bring them together. So thank you. All right. That concludes our information items, and now we'll turn to the public comment portion of the meeting. As we move into public comment, I want to remind everybody that per our policy, we'll recognize students speaking first on agenda items first and then off agenda items. And then speakers commenting on items before tonight's agenda, and we do have several, will be heard before speakers speaking on other topics. So all of the speakers will be heard in order of sign up. We have so many tonight that we will likely have to cut it off, have the rest of our business session, and then return to those off-agenda speakers after we've concluded that business. So you've heard me recite the policy before. I know many of you are familiar with it. Again, members of the public are welcome to offer the comments and criticisms directed at the substantive ideas, actions, and procedures of the board. Laws and policies of North Carolina provide that there are certain issues that might relate to individual personnel, student matters, other items that are confidential are not appropriate for public comment, but those may be addressed to the board. If there's something that needs to be brought up with staff while you're here, we can direct you to the appropriate staff. In the interest of maintaining civility and decorum, again, we please, speakers should address their comments to the Board of Education and must refrain from personal attacks or comments directed at individual board members, staff, and especially members of the public who've come here tonight, a number of whom are here to make public comment. Please remain at the podium during your speaking time. Any materials you wish to share should be shared with our board attorney, Mr. Malone, sitting there at the end of the table. Again, as speakers, you may speak for up to 3 minutes. Note that the microphones are adjustable. Your time will begin when you start to speak. You'll see the green light light up. At that time, you'll have 3 minutes. Don't be surprised. There'll be an audible tone. That first one is just your warning. You've got 1 minute left. You'll see a yellow light up. At that point, I'm sorry, you'll have 30 seconds remaining in your time. You caught me on that one. 30 seconds remaining on your time. When the speaking time is up, you will see a red light. At that time, you do have to conclude your comments. I'm going to call the next speaker. Again, please respect the speakers. Please, audience members, don't interrupt speakers. Please don't make comments directed at speakers. We want to treat everybody with civility and let everyone make the comments that they've come here to make tonight. So at this time, I'll go to our agenda of speakers. Our first speaker tonight is a student. We have Cam Fife, I believe, speaking on House Bill 10. Welcome, Cam.
Good evening. My name is Cam Fife. I am a student at Enloe High School, and I love my school. It is a wonderful school. The teachers are wonderful, the community is wonderful, and I am proud to be both a student at Enloe and a student of the Wake County Public School System lifelong. But every single day when I walk into school, I see the cracks that are left by chronic underfunding and a lack of support to our teachers and administrators. Last year, nearly every single one of my teachers was made to work a second job just to be able to continue to afford to live within a reasonable distance of their work. This meant that most of my teachers were not getting adequate amounts of sleep, not having time to grade or perform the work that they need to do to further the education of our students. I feel that I was robbed and my classmates were robbed of our teachers' attention and of our education. Additionally, when I was a freshman, coming into high school English, I was very excited. Yet, not a month into my school experience, my English teacher left. This has happened to me 3 times in my Wake County public education experience, where my teacher, not a month into the year, was offered a better position at a private institution for nearly double the pay and much more job stability. I do not blame my teachers for leaving. I would have made the same decision. But this is incredibly discouraging for students like myself who one day hope to pursue a career in public education. And I think it is a real tragedy that these students in my class were left behind in that way. I have continued to see those students not want to pursue advanced level classes in those courses, English and math, because they failed to receive the grounding in those subjects that they would need to pursue those passionately and well. I would encourage everyone and the members of the General Assembly to stand against House Bill 10 as it robs our students of more funding that they need to pursue their education and their dreams. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Gabrielle Alcantara. Is Gabrielle or Gabriel here? Now, I want to be clear, this is speaking time for students.
Oh, I didn't put student.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'll put you next in line after the students finish. Thank you. Next up on the student list is Rowan Bilodeau. And Rowan will be followed by Mr. Alcantara.
I started this speech with good afternoon, but this is a lot later than I thought it was going to be. So good evening. Since today is my birthday, I've decided not to talk about the somber topics I usually cover. Instead, I want to offer thanks. Thank you to those of you on the board who truly put all students first. Thank you to those of you on the board who have listened to me and what I'm really saying rather than using my words to further an anti-me rhetoric. Thank you to those of you who recognize and celebrate each child's differences instead of standing on platforms of hate against those differences. Thank you to those who take student safety seriously instead of making it a political issue. Thank you to those who have proven time and time again that you care about me as an individual. Thank you to those of you who don't let politics get in the way of providing for students, since none of these issues are political anyway. Thank you to those of you who recognize how difficult it is for me to keep coming back here. Thank you to my specific board member for always making a concerted effort to help me when I bring up a problem. Thank you to those of you who see me for what I'm worth, a human being deserving of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as opposed to seeing me as something worthy of hatred and unworthy of rights. Thank you to those of you who have provided me the exigence to keep coming back despite the nastiness I hear directed at me, my community, or just like simply the words, "I'm transgender." And lastly, thank you for those of you who have shown me the side of the world where people hate difference and treat me like a disease. If anything, that's made me more passionate to stand up for myself. I am not a disease, I am a person, and you can't make me go away. Have a good night, y'all. Mine will be good. I'm expecting birthday cake.
Thank you. Our next speaker, we will go to Mr. Alcantara, and again, we apologize for the confusion on the agenda list.
Happy birthday, by the way. Good evening, Superintendent Taylor, Chair Haggerty, and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I have tremendous respect for the work that you guys do. I'm the parent of one child in a public middle school and another child who got his whole education in elementary school at Wake County, but then he opted to go to private school on his choice. I want to bring to the forefront a topic that I don't think we talk about enough. Maybe it's taboo. School avoidance. School avoidance is when students begin regularly missing school due to intense emotional, psychological, or social barriers. It can stem from anxiety, depression, bullying, family stress, or trauma. And when left unaddressed, it can lead to long-term consequences such as academic failure, social isolation, emotional distress, and diminished long-term opportunities. Some of these families have experienced this for years, unfortunately. It's not that school-avoidant kids won't go to school. They can't. If they could, they really would. Many of these students are struggling in silence, whether it be because of threats of school shootings, academic pressure, bullying, or the challenges that come with socialization. For some, they're avoiding school because it has become an overwhelming anxiety-inducing environment. What's important to recognize is that school avoidance is not truancy, nor a form of defiance or something that can be fixed with traditional discipline. School avoidance is a cry for help. What's at stake is the future of these students. We can't afford to lose these students, nor can they afford to lose their education, which will play a significant role in determining their future. So I want to know what is Wake County going to do to address the problem of school avoidance. I applaud you for your efforts thus far on chronic absenteeism, but chronic absenteeism is too broad, as it's anecdotally often tied to social, economical, or logistical challenges such as lack of transportation, single-parent households. School avoidance is a subset of chronic absenteeism. Hence, it should be addressed specifically and named specifically. The good news is there are effective strategies we can implement. First is identification of these kids. I only see I have a minute left, so I think I'm just going to try to summarize. But I think we need more education in our schools for specifically special education. I'm finding that a lot of the educators don't know about the IDEA or the Child Find Act. It's an obligation of the school to identify these challenges and address them. They need more training on neurodivergence and what I would call invisible disabilities. Second, we got to prioritize mental health services. I think you're doing all that you can. You're pouring a lot of money into that. That's more of a jab for the state, I guess. Third, we have to continue to try to create an environment that is free of bullying, that is safe for our kids, where they don't feel like they're at risk of being bullied the next day. So I got 10 seconds. I'll say in closing, school avoidance is a mental health crisis. I would welcome an opportunity to work with you all as an invested parent myself, and I thank you for the time this evening.
Thank you. So now we'll go to our additional speakers. First on an on-agenda topic, Becky Lou Hobbs speaking on Constitution Day. And Ms. Lou Hobbs will be followed by Maria Ramirez. Good evening.
Hello. Happy Constitution and Citizenship Day. I'm Becky Lou Hobbs, mom of 3 amazing kids and chapter chair of Moms for Liberty in Wake County. The U.S. Constitution is the foundation of our republic. And for those of you questioning that statement, recite the Pledge of Allegiance. It's a republic. I'll remind you that there's a difference between a constitutional republic is not the same as a democracy. Last year, Moms for Liberty volunteers delivered constitutions to Wake County 8th graders across the county. Most teachers and administrators, and even many of the board, just seemed to not know what it was, even though federal law, state law, and Wake County policy requires the day to be recognized and there to be educational programs about this foundational document and citizenship. I hope you've read it. Each of you got a copy last year. It doesn't take long, only maybe an hour. And Moms for Liberty is thrilled to have had an integral role in educating students about the founding of our country as a constitutional republic with principles of liberty, law, and limited government. This year, Moms for Liberty volunteers delivered over 14,000 constitutions to 8th graders across the county. Our volunteers visited over 50 schools, including public and charter schools. At each school, we were greeted with smiles and gratitude. Teachers and administrators were happy to receive these resources for their classrooms. Thank you for formally recognizing Constitution and Citizenship Day. We have a long way to go in educating our children and maybe even some adults, and we look forward to continuing to educate and empower our parents about their rights as citizens. So kind of switching topics, I want to tell you about my children and why there needs to be choice in House Bill 10 and funding for the children. My first child was bullied incessantly to the point where he suffers a lot of anxiety and depression. By the time he reached high school, he could not be in one of our high schools. Too many people. The anxiety he would get when he would get in crowds of more than like 100 people, he had to go to a smaller setting. We were able to send him to that setting, and he thrived. And he actually graduated a year early because we chose to send him somewhere else. And it was a stretch for us. We're not wealthy people. My second child, he's still in public schools, but we've endured a stabbing incident that resulted in death and injury of other children. Another murder suspect was from that school, and we had to deal with that. I'm constantly in fear of his safety. But my third child, there was more promoting sexual orientation and flags promoting that everywhere around the school, but not a single American flag, which is required. So she won't be going to public school anymore either.
Our next speaker is Maria Ramirez, and Ms. Ramirez will be followed by Julie Page. Okay. And so I understand there's translation being offered tonight?
Yes, I am an interpreter, and she's going to go ahead and speak, and then I'm going to interpret everything she said.
Okay. And so by practice, where you have an interpreter and they're speaking, the time will be extended to allow for the interpretation.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María Ramírez. Soy madre de 4 niños estudiantes de escuelas públicas en el condado de Wake. Primero que nada, gracias por darme este tiempo para hablar. Soy una graduada del Grupo de Poder de los Padres de Alianza para Justicia en Educación, o EJA. Durante los últimos 6 meses, hemos aprendido sobre diferentes temas relacionados con las escuelas públicas, incluyendo cómo los legisladores de Carolina del Norte, en vez de darles más fondos para ayudar a las escuelas públicas, prefieren darles a los dueños de escuelas privadas. Le quiero dar las gracias a los miembros de esta junta que están en contra de esa horrible propuesta, la HB 10, que roba el dinero de las escuelas públicas y lo desvía aún más a las escuelas privadas. En un momento en que las escuelas públicas tradicionales están luchando para satisfacer las muchas necesidades que la pandemia ha amplificado.
So I'm going to do this. So she said, good evening, my name is Maria Ramirez, and I am the mother of 4 children who are students in Raleigh. Thank you for giving me this time to speak as a graduate of the Parent Power Group from the Alliance for Educational Justice. Over the past 6 months, we have learned about various issues related to public schools, including how North Carolina legislators would rather give more funds to private schools owners instead of helping public schools. I want to thank the members of this board who opposed that terrible proposal. HB 10 steals money from public schools and would divert even more money to private schools at a time when traditional public schools are struggling to meet the many needs amplified by the pandemic.
Estas son mis preocupaciones sobre el HB10. La pérdida de dinero de los impuestos puede reducir los programas académicos y el personal docente en las escuelas públicas tradicionales. No hay pruebas de que las escuelas privadas o religiosas ofrezcan una educación de mayor calidad para los estudiantes que las escuelas públicas. Las escuelas privadas no tienen que comprobar las referencias de sus empleados y voluntarios como hacen las escuelas públicas. Podría haber un pedófilo enseñando a tu hijo. Las escuelas privadas no tienen que contratar a profesores licenciados y no están sujetas a las normas académicas impuestas a las escuelas públicas. Las escuelas privadas no están obligadas a servir comidas gratuitas o a precio reducido, ni ofrecer transporte, ni prestar servicios de educación especial, y pueden elegir a los alumnos que admiten. Le pido que ustedes alcen sus voces y peleen de nuestro lado. Muchas gracias.
Okay, yeah, she says that these are my concerns about HB 10. Loss of tax revenue may reduce academic programs and teaching staff in public schools. There is no evidence that private or religious schools offer better education, quality of education for students than public schools. Private schools do not have a background check their employees and volunteers as public schools do. A pedophile could be teaching your child. Private schools do not have to hire licensed teachers and are not subject to the academic standards imposed on public schools. Public schools are not required to provide free or reduced price meals, transportation, special education services, and can also choose which students they admit. I urge you to raise your voices and fight alongside us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Our next speaker is Julie Page, and Ms. Page will be followed by Maggie Fife. I'm sorry, there's... I'm sorry, sir, I'll address it because it's a good faith question, but the rules are you can't address the board while we're conducting business. No, we had 3 people signed up as students. One of them turned out not to be a student. Those are the only students that we have signed up for public comment through the public comment process. So those are we've heard from all the ones who have signed up tonight. And Ms. Chief Luton may be able to give you more information. All right, Ms. Page, I apologize.
That's okay. Give me a second to get here. Hi, everyone. I want to say thank you to Superintendent Taylor and Board Chair Hegarty for issuing the Constitution Week proclamation. It's a bold and positive action to assist in educating our students on the founding of our great nation, and I commend you for it. I do want to talk about one phrase in particular, and I quote, "Whereas the Constitution of the United States is the cornerstone of our nation's democracy and embodies the principles of liberty, justice, and equality that have guided our nation since its inception." While I appreciate the sentiment here, I want to point out that our government is actually a constitutional republic, not a democracy. A democracy is a political system where the people by majority vote at the polls to select their rulers, and the rulers have absolute power by their own majority vote. In contrast, a constitutional republic is a system where the people also vote by majority to select their rulers to make laws. The difference is that those rulers cannot make any laws that they just please to do because the Constitution restricts their power.
The following is taken from an article from the Daily Mining Gazette by Marilyn Sager on March 29, 2024. Great strides have been made toward the goal of subverting our republic and transforming it into a democracy. The subverter's foremost tactic is subversion of language by calling America a democracy until people thoughtlessly accept and use that term. Totalitarians have obscured the real meaning of American principles of government. Writers of the Constitution were anxious to safeguard liberty against dictatorship. Their chief anxiety was to protect the country against democracy. Bless you. The Constitution in Article 4, Section 4 requires a Republican form of government for all states. Nowhere in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or the Declaration of Independence is the word democracy mentioned. John Adams said, democracy will envy all, contend with all, endeavor to pull down all. And when by chance, if it happens to get the upper hand for a short time, democracy will be revengeful, bloody, and cruel. Students should be taught properly about our constitutional republic, and this necessary revision to the proclamation would be a good place to start. I urge you to strongly consider this change tonight for the sake of correctly educating our children in with the United States knowledge and patriotism. And I just wanted to say a couple of real quick things. Chair Hagerty has recently acknowledged that funds have been mismanaged and misspent for years in the school system, which is one reason why the AC units are broken all the time and not fixed. What happened with the COVID money? Where did it all go? Why was it not spent properly? We are still waiting to find out. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker, thank you, is Maggie Fife, will be followed by Laura Wood. Good evening.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time this evening. My name's Maggie. I'm the proud parent of 2 kids in Wake County Public Schools. Our family has loved all of our public schools, from Conn Elementary to Ligon Middle to Enloe High School. Our family has also watched teachers and administrators do the best with what they have in the face of chronic underfunding and rampant teacher turnover, that's understandable based on their pay. This past weekend, I watched, as probably many of you did, the debate between candidates for Superintendent of Public Instruction with interest. A phrase Michelle Morrow, the Republican candidate, said stuck in my head. Morrow, an extremist and supporter of private school vouchers, calls the almost $1 billion, $1 billion taxpayer dollars, the legislature has diverted this year from public schools for unregulated private schools a short-term fix. Vouchers are not a short-term fix. They are an almost decade-long problem. Let me repeat, vouchers aren't a short-term fix. They have added to our North Carolina public schools' long-term financial problems. Since 2015, the state legislature has given $50 million from Wake County taxpayers alone to unregulated private schools. That money could have provided a long-term fix for low teacher pay, early childhood education waiting lists, needed classroom assistance, and allowed more of our county funds to go to maintaining our aging buildings rather, and this has already been discussed, rather than subsidizing woefully inadequate state pay scales for our teachers and bus drivers. Instead, the legislature is giving a taxpayer handout to wealthy families. 63% of the people receiving these handouts make well over $100,000 a year. They make well more than our teachers make, double at least. And unaccountable private schools. The state legislature's voucher handouts are long-term threats to our state's children, families, schools, and businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Laura Wood, and Laura will be followed by Marius Thompson. Good evening.
Good evening, Superintendent Taylor, Chair Hagerty.
Vice Chair Ms. Johnson-Hostler, and board members. My name is Laura Wood, and I am the Environmental Connections Integration Specialist at Lincoln Heights Environmental Connections Magnet Elementary. I am here this evening to speak about the Sustainability Policy 1810. On behalf of myself and the Wake Green Schools Committee, we want to say thank you to all of you that have worked to create this policy that will be brought before the board tonight. Thank you to the facility staff and the policy team and all of the committees that have worked hard behind the scenes to draft and revise this policy. In March of 2020, before COVID, we started talking about the importance of such a policy and the need to put one in place within WCPSS. We are elated to finally be at this point so that we can begin the work of creating district-wide standards and procedures for many different sustainability initiatives. As we have always said, we are doing great things, but we need to take the next steps forward to better manage and conserve resources, reduce and eliminate waste, and to reuse and recycle materials, all while teaching and learning about environmental literacy. Collecting baseline data, which will then lead to monitoring and reporting, will be essential to make measurable progress across the district. This work will need staff to develop and implement these practices and have accountability for their implementation. In closing, thank you for Policy 1810. I look forward to seeing this vision put into place, and I think it is only fitting to mention that today is the perfect day to vote to approve this policy. Today is my birthday, so happy birthday to you as well, and thank you for the perfect birthday present.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Wood.
Thank you. Good night. I'm going home.
All right, our next speaker, coming up, Marius Thompson, will be followed by Serena Johnson. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Superintendent Taylor and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few concerns with you this evening. My name is Marius Thompson, and I am the mother of two amazing sons, a junior and a senior, who are honor students in Raleigh. I am also a EGA 2024 Parent Power Cohort graduate. I would love for the board to adopt policies that protect the privacy and rights for all of our students. I know that training can be provided to staff on how to create a more welcoming and inclusive environments for families so that public schools are more appealing to our students, staff, parents, and communities. Over the past several months in EGA, we talked and learned about many different topics related to public school. One that stuck out to me personally was tardiness and consequences. The narrative about this issue has been stated that our children have enough time to transition during class, which isn't always true. It is a case-to-case basis, like the size of the school or teachers not adhering to the bell schedule, which can cause our students to be late for their next classes, also considering that some students use this time for a bathroom break. As a mom, I'm constantly contacting my son's teacher to make adjustments and to update his attendance when he's late getting to his classes. This tardiness has never been his personal issue, but because of his prior teacher. This unnecessary stress, which he cannot control, has also affected his mindset and focus on occasions. I am here today because you have the power to change this tardiness policy. Please consider allowing a few more minutes for our students to transition during class changes without the stress of running late. My children simply want to learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Serena Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to speak today. I'm here with Education Justice Alliance, and I have to say that I am very happy to hear that most of the board is on for making sure that the public school system has resources to do what it needs to do for our students in the school system. I want to speak on resources that has been available for the schools and what's not available for the schools. I'm a mom of 3 kids that attended Wake County Public School System. One of my kids have disabilities, and we went through a lot of issues just getting services for her within the school system because of funding. And to see how drastically these funds have been cut for the public school system, now it upsets me because I know what I went through. And to have a board member not be in support of public schools getting as much resources as needed when it comes to busing, when it comes to staffing, when it comes to additional medical services that's needed within the school system, and I see a child that resembles my child in the audience, and it brings me to emotions that I didn't even know was going to come up today. But it's like, what are we thinking about? Who are we really doing this for? Now, if we're not going to do everything that we can for the students within our school system, every student that needs supports, why are you here? And that takes me back to another board member saying that we have to be careful on who we vote into these seats, because this is why we're in the predicament that we're in right now with the General Assembly and with our school board. We have to make sure that we are getting people in positions that want to do something for all students. And then we talk about the Constitution. The Constitution was written, it was written for me. And we have to acknowledge that, and it has to be culturally affirming on the history of the Constitution, all of it, all of it. Those words sound so beautiful. They sound so amazing. But they weren't for my ancestors. They weren't for me. They weren't for a lot of people in this room. So we're going to address even these days, let's acknowledge all of the aspects of what's going on here. Not just what looks good, not just what feels good to say in pretty words. Because we are going through stuff. We have students that are, my daughter is lesbian. She went through hell in school, not being accepted for who she is within the school system. And we have to make sure that all students are looked at on who they are and caring for people. If we're going to do justice and the Constitution and we're going to speak on it, be about it. Be about those words. Because those words was written in a time where they did not mean it for all of us. So let's mean this for all of us. If we're going to speak on what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, make sure that's what you're representing. I'm representing EJA today because that's what we represent, all students. And we want to make sure that we address issues within black and brown students because they're not getting everything that they need. And that's what we're here for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. At this point, we have a little bit of time left. What I'd like to, before we would transition to the rest of our agenda, what I'd like to do, Ms. Butler, I understand that you're a student. Bailey Butler? No?
Lorena Benson.
Oh, sorry, wrong one on the list. Lorena Benson, okay. If you'd like to, we'll put you at the front of the list of the off-agenda speakers, which is now. So we'll let you, as a student, go ahead and come up, and then we'll try to get one more after that, and then we'll proceed with our business agenda.
Good evening. Thank you very much for this chance to speak. So, my name is Lorena Benson. I'm in the 10th grade and I'm 15 years old. For 11 of those years, I lived in the Dominican Republic. 3 months ago, my family and I moved to North Carolina and have me enrolled in the highly rated Athens Drive Magnet High School. I was very excited for this opportunity. Until last Friday, that is, on Friday the 13th, my English honors class, my teacher assigned the class to read a story independently and then come together into groups and discuss the story and answer some questions. There was a part in this story that made me feel very uncomfortable, and I looked around and saw the same expression on other students' faces. We all had just read the following. It was not the summer you fell in love with your cousin Doozy, because that happened just a few summers before, when you both wiggled into the tiny space behind Grandma's garage, and he tried to fit what you both called his banana into what you both called your tomato, but neither of you was sure which was the right hole. Even after reading again, it makes me feel very uncomfortable. This graphic, ancestral, sexual language should not be taught in any class, much less an honors English class. That day I came back home from school. As per usual, I told my parents about my day and the things I did. I showed them what I was taught in my English class, and they were as outraged as I was. This incident got me thinking. In my Healthful Living Honors class, I am being taught about brain functions and development. I was taught that the teenage brains, like mine, are not fully developed yet, and that we must be careful about what we engage during these years. Based on this logic, I am a teenager, my brain is not fully developed, and I should not have graphic, ancestral, sexual content taught to me in my classes. I am deeply bothered and deeply disappointed. I have decided to leave Athens Drive High School because I should not have to deal with pornographic incestual sexual content taught to me in my classes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. Our final speaker before we move to our business agenda will be Margaret Bilodeau.
Hello, everyone, members of the board, superintendent. Tonight, I want to talk about something that's undoubtedly at the forefront of all of our minds, school safety. In meeting after meeting, we talk about how to make our schools safer. We want all our children to feel safe at school, and we should be doing everything in our power to ensure that they are. But we have to face the truth. There are children right now who are in critical need of protection, and sadly, that need extends to their time spent in school. The fact that there is even a debate as to whether to legally allow the othering of transgender children is not only abhorrent but harmful. We're seeing the consequences nationwide. Title IX protections have been put on hold in not just many K-12 schools, but at over 700 colleges and universities around the country. And we are in the middle of what is being called the red zone, the period between the start of school and Thanksgiving break, where nearly half of all on-campus assaults occur. We cannot afford to ignore the vulnerability of all of these children. Some have suggested single-stall bathrooms as a solution to protect transgender students, but let's not fool ourselves. Single-stall bathrooms do not protect transgender students. Separate but equal is never equal. Support for single-stall cells under the guise of safety is a disingenuous attempt to appear concerned about transgender students, when in reality it does little more than perpetuate their isolation and will require funding that we do not have. Let's be very clear. The very notion of creating separate safe spaces acknowledges the fact that these students are not safe. If a child feels unsafe in a shared space like a bathroom, the solution is not to isolate them. It's to address the underlying reasons why they don't feel safe in the first place. The fact that children feel forced to request single stalls as a form of self-protection is not a sign that things are going well. And using the words and fears of a child to justify further othering is not just unbelievable, it's cruel. The solution is not separation. The solution is creating an environment where all students feel safe and where no one feels forced to isolate themselves for protection. I am tired. I'm tired of having to beg for my children and for all children to be treated with the same respect and dignity as everyone else. Not everyone has a choice. Pouring money into private schools takes opportunities from all children, most especially low-income and special education children, and they can reject anyone they choose. There is no alternative for low-income children and the vast majority of ECS 1 students outside of institutionalization. Let's remember our North Carolina Constitution, and since today is Constitution Day, as a reminder, every single person present in the United States is protected by the Constitution, regardless of immigration status, and is afforded the right to be treated with human dignity, especially children. When will we finally understand that marginalizing any group of people never works out well, not for the group being targeted and not for the whole community? Thank you.
Thank you. So speakers have signed up for other off-agenda topics. We will get to your comments. We will get to them, though, at the conclusion of the business portion of our meeting. So at this point, we will return to our agenda. And first up, our comments from our superintendent, Dr. Robert Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening to you all. As we've just heard in detail during the work session, our school district made significant strides this past school year in terms of academic proficiency and our four-year graduation rate. So I'd like to take a moment to commend our students, families, and staff for their hard work and determination, and to look ahead to how we can build on this momentum. Here are a few highlights from the data. Our four-year graduation rate was 91.3%, the highest rate in this district's history. The class of 2024 was also our largest graduating class ever at over 12,000 students. These figures are even more impressive when you consider these students started high school in the fall of 2020 and the uncertainty of the pandemic. Our overall academic proficiency rates increased to 64.2% and is now just 1 percentage point shy of our pre-pandemic proficiency rate. In fact, standardized test scores in many subjects are actually higher than before the pandemic. We also saw a major increase in the number of schools that exceeded expected growth in academic proficiency. 40% of our schools, 77 in total, exceeded expected growth. That's up from 29% last school year, and it's our best performance since 2013. In total, 85% of our schools met or exceeded growth, which is also our best performance since 2013. We also saw significant improvement in the school letter grades issued by the state. Nearly 60% of our schools received an A or B, another record high. We also had 10 schools that were able to exit low-performing status as measured by the state. You can find more details about these and other statistics on our district website. I'd also like to direct your attention specifically to the school progress reports that our data and accountability and research teams compile every year. These reports include not only test score data, but also data regarding demographics, school leadership, and school climate, offering a more comprehensive snapshot of each school. You can find these at our wcpss.net/progress reports on our website. We all, of course, greatly encouraged by this significant progress. Yet we are equally mindful that there is much work left to do, particularly for our students of color and students of low socioeconomic status. Reducing and ultimately eliminating these disparities in some outcomes lies at the very heart of our strategic plan. Tremendous effort has gone into putting policies and practices in place to give our teachers and school administrators the tools they need to meet the needs of every student. Indeed, I believe these policies and practices played a major role in the growth we saw last school year. This data is a heartening reminder that we are on the right track and should fill all of us with confidence and renewed determination to continue pressing onward and upward. I'm more than certain that than ever that we are well on our way to a new level of national excellence. With that, we also need state policies and practices in both funding and measuring academic progress fairly to further support our work. Lastly, I would like to thank the Wake Partnership and everyone who has supported the Tools for Schools school supply drive. This drive collected 400,000 items and raised about $70,000 over the summer. This helped stock the shelves at the Tools for Schools classroom supply store, where Wake County school teachers can obtain these essential items free of charge. Since the store opened for the current school year on August the 6th, our teachers have gathered more than $160,000 worth of supplies. That's about $120 in supplies for each of the nearly 1,400 teachers who have shopped there thus far this year. Since its launch in January 2022, the Tools for Schools has given away more than $1 million in new school supplies. So last year alone, more than 8,000 teachers representing each one of our schools took advantage of this program. We are grateful for all the ways that Wake Ed Partnership continues to support our staff and students. Tools for Schools program in particular has had a direct impact not only on the availability of classroom resources, but also on teacher morale. I feel strongly that Tools for Schools, in addition to saving teachers money, has reduced their stress and reminded them just how valued they are. That's why I'm pleased to see the tremendous community support for this program, and I know it will continue to grow. So again, Tools for Schools operates throughout the school year, so it's not too late to support the program through donations or for any teachers to make an appointment to book their own shopping spree. So again, we thank Tools for Schools. Mr. Chair, I'll yield it back to you. I didn't want to rush through these comments tonight because I know we are pressed for time.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. All of your comments are well received and well stated. I'll follow up on a couple of them just to add a little bit behind them. But this comment is really for our board members. I wanted to make you aware of this document. This is the Student Resource Guide. It's put out by Wake County government with a lot of our government, local government, and other public agency partners. Oftentimes, we talk about supporting the students, making sure that our students arrive at schools ready to learn. We do our best to satisfy that, but oftentimes we know the need is very, very great. Parents, counselors, staff all need to know about these resources that are available and the good work that's being done. I will be emailing you each a copy of this. I'd encourage you all to read it. Just familiarize yourself with what resources are available to families, and then feel free to distribute it as you feel is appropriate. Again, I only recently discovered it. It was just updated this month with the latest information and programs to assist families, and I've already used it successfully to help a number of families out of specific hardships that they had. So thank you. Dr. Taylor and I, we were both, along with Ms. Rice, who's not here today, at Green Leadership and World Language Elementary School. And we were there to talk about and see the results that the students had made 1 year after being lifted up by the HELPS program. And board members, and I hope folks in the community are familiar with the HELPS program. I'm hopeful that we can take that presentation that was shared with us and bring it to perhaps a student achievement committee, because the results were just phenomenal. The interventions, having adults come into the schools and spend time with those children, reading with those children, helping them. And again, these are volunteers who've been trained through our partners with Wake Ed Partnership, and then the Help Education. We looked at beginning of the year tests. We looked at end of the year tests. And just for participation in the program, students had to have been identified as facing some severe challenges. By the end of the year, those kids were performing at or better than the school averages. And in some cases, were among some of the top performers in that school. And like we talked about, and to Dr. Taylor's comments, the growth that we've seen to get us to exceeding pre-pandemic levels is huge. And part of this, part of our focus has been early literacy, those K through 3 students. So I'd encourage you to learn more about the program. Hopefully we can find some time, I know we have a busy agenda, but maybe to look at those results. And if we can see the good results, this is something that we can expand into additional schools, into mathematics, into other areas that I know our board has talked about. I know we are continuing to experience transportation issues through the district. And as we heard today in our staffing updates, while we've done a great job of getting our school-based positions back up over 96% fill rate, we still do have challenges with transportation. But as Dr. Taylor pointed out, Wake County is trending in the right direction, and we are bucking these state trends where we're still seeing in other counties declining bus driver, bus driver enrollment in these positions. And so we know what we have is working. We know that for many families it's not working fast enough. So we're going to continue our efforts, and we hope that we can show more relief sometime soon. I was also lucky this past week to attend with a number of members of our staff a program at the Friday Institute about mobile phone use in our schools, looking at different policies, what people have done, and we got to hear from other superintendents and staff from around the state about the experiments that they've done, seeing the early results from staff, from teachers and families of changes in these policies. We heard from youth development and child psychology experts, and really got a good balanced view, pros and cons of what the implications of technology use and specifically mobile phone use can be in our schools. And so I look forward to the discussion we'll have later this fall on some of those issues. But my final thing, and I guess it is related to technology and phone use, is I don't know that we've come together and given a lot of discussion to the events that took place in Georgia just a few weeks ago. Anytime there's violence in the schools, obviously we're all concerned, parents, families, staff, teachers, the entire community's anxiety level raises. And we come together and we question our safety and our security. We had a good briefing today about the safety and security efforts in our schools, but I want to call out something very specific, which is the number of threats that have been called in to our schools, to our high schools, our middle schools, even in elementary school. Now, thankfully, all of these threats have been hoaxes, but we have to take every threat seriously. We can't afford not to. And we know this is disruptive. This disrupts the school day. It creates anxiety for the students, anxiety for the parents, and it's just plain wrong. But again, we have to take every threat very seriously. So You'll hear us talk about this at the board table, but I'm going to say it once more. We do have a tip line that students and parents can call to report concerns related to safety and security. It's 919-856-1911. That's 919-856-1911. Oftentimes, some of these threats are made as a joke, as a hoax, as a way to disrupt school, as a way to get out of class. And we have to communicate to our families and our youth that it's not a joke and it's not funny. Whether or not a person carries out a threat, and we don't want any threats acted upon, this is a criminal offense. This is, under North Carolina state law, a Class H felony. And even students who are joking can be prosecuted by our district attorney. And they are responsible for all of the harm that they're doing to their fellow students, disrupting their education, putting them in harm's way, creating panics, and it has to stop. So parents, please talk to your students about the irresponsibility of such hoaxes and threats. If you allow your students to use social media, please monitor that social media and just help us get the message out that these hoaxes are not a joke. We have to take them very seriously, and we have to hold people, everyone responsible, even if they're joking, for making these threats. There's just no other way. It's a threat. It's a threat to our safety. It's a threat to our security, and we just can't tolerate it. So please work with your children on this. Thank you. So that concludes my remarks. I'll check to see if our Vice Chair, Ms. Johnson-Hostler, is available to make comment. Here she is.
Yes, can you hear me as well?
We got you.
Perfect. I'm speaking of cell phones and technology. I've had quite a bit of technology issues, but thank you to the staff who's been bearing with me. And again, I will start by something that wasn't on my notes, and that's happy birthday to those who are committed to join our school board meeting on Tuesday night. So both to Rowan and to Ms. Wood, happy birthday and thank you for joining, and hopefully they're both gone home to eat cake. Again, you've heard from our board, but also staff member about today's Constitutional Day, but I would also remind us that it's also in light of that. While the Constitution certainly was not written for all of us, there is a day that is for all of us adults, and that's National Registration Day. And so, as we've already talked about school voucher programs, and indeed I would be the first to say school choice is a parent's right. However, it is also the right of all of our students to have a sound basic education, and that requires us to do that by fully funding our public schools, and that is the responsibility of our North Carolina General Assembly. And so I don't think I have to say much else other than today is the day, and so hopefully all of you who are watching and who are in the room are already registered to vote, and I encourage you to invite your friends to not just register to vote, but to check their voter registration, because indeed every vote does truly count. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't add that, given the things that we've talked about, but also a reminder that each of us independently have the ability to change the outcomes to see public schools reach the potential that we all know that it does have. Second, I'd like to thank Dr. Sturdivant, who was walking out on a dreary but then humid day on Saturday at the Crosby Community Day. Dr. Taylor, you'll be glad to know that she was there ensuring that every organization in that space was scanning the QR code and registering for community mapping. Again, just another way to remind us of our commitment to engaging our public, especially in the trying times, as our chair just spoke to the threats that are being made on our schools. It is truly going to take an entire community to be invested in our public schools, and I certainly felt that that's the feeling that I got this weekend in people being willing to engage with us around being supportive of Wake County Public Schools. And lastly, I will say, which I'm sure, I didn't hear another colleague say it yet, but I'm sure it's on somebody's list, and that is an acknowledgement that we are also in Hispanic Heritage Month. And so just another reminder to us around the importance of our community and community engagement. And thank you again to the staff who's been very patient with my technology issues this evening.
Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson-Hosler. We appreciate it, and we're glad that you were able to join us for those comments. All right, we'll go around the virtual table. We'll start with Mr. Hershey.
No board comments tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hershey. We'll go to Ms. Edmonds.
Just a thank you to teachers in light of the data that we reviewed today out of the accomplishments that the class of 2024, particularly the high school students of 2024, the students deserve a lot of credit for sure, but we wouldn't see these results if it weren't for our phenomenal educators, our dedicated educators. For these kids to have started in virtual learning during a pandemic with all of that, that was entailed. Just a shout out to them, because all of the results that we've seen that we'll talk about more next month are a credit to you, and we're very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you. I just would like to extend a thank you to the families who continue to share information via the thought exchange and participate in the virtual information sessions that are being provided by our Office of Student Assignment. I've been in frequent contact with Ms. Pulliam and her team as they review the information and questions that are shared. I encourage everyone to continue to participate and check the FAQs on the website for updates, and we will continue the conversation. I do also want to lift up our Holly Springs High School community and ask that you keep them in your thoughts and in your hearts at this time. They've had a really tough week. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. We'll come back around. Ms. Rice is not here, but I will wish her a happy birthday. Also joining the crowds of those celebrating birthdays this week. And next we'll go to Ms. Caulfield.
Thank you. So I want to start out with the recent events of the bomb threats and just kind of reiterate. I was going to talk about some of what you just said and how very severe it is. And you've heard some of the facts, some of the questions that were presented. We've discussed in closed session some of the security measures and some questions that were shared, some concerns, and some answers that they were able to provide. I want to point out that the heritage evacuation by law enforcement worked very quickly, efficiently to make sure that our students got out to safety first and foremost. While we will continue to work on improvement, our number one is keeping our kids safe, and they did. I want to thank the staff and Wake Forest Police Department for making sure that their safety was our first priority. That being said, I would like to reiterate what Mr. Hershey had, switching tables, what Chair Haggerty said, that we need to continue. We heard your feedback. We heard from our families. We received it. But we also need the families to be involved and engaged and understand that, we heard the numbers. I'm not sure if we could share the numbers, but they were astonishing to hear in such a short period of time across the county, and not just in our county, in other counties as well. So our children really need to understand the consequences that will come from this, but not only that, the chaos it causes, the safety concerns that it causes, the traffic that's outside, the resources we need to bring in, how much the teachers are also living in fear. This is not just a simple prank that you can say on social media or make a phone call. It goes well beyond that and well beyond that day. So I really do hope that our families are going to take a little bit of time just to have a conversation, a little bit of table talk, to speak to their children, just so they understand a little bit more about what it means. I was originally going to address the importance of today, Constitution Day, that recognizes September 17th of 1787, and Citizenship Day, that recognizes those who have become U.S. citizens. But as Mr. Cook put it so well, he stated the value of this day, and I just wanted to say thank you again for bringing that proclamation to Wake County Public School families in support of the importance of this day and what it stands for. I encourage families to open conversation with their children about what they learned and celebrated at school today. I wanted to share a recent meeting that I had. I had the pleasure of meeting with Principal Stacy McQuirt and Dr. Savage at Beaver Dam Elementary School. Principal Stacy has been with Beaver Dam for just 2 years, and she has taken that school from an F to a C. And while a C sounds like it's still kind of mediocre, that's a huge, huge undertaking. It's different if you're taking it from a B school and you're improving a little bit because they have a lot of foundation. But to have a school that's in that status and to take them that far in such a short period of time was a real accomplishment. So I wanted to lift her up for that and the staff that was at Beaver Dam. She shared with us some of the magic in her success, or in their success, I should say, and that not only did she have such a special staff, a committed staff, but the flexibility that allowed many more instructional assistants in her school and the real impacts that that had. Using Restart spending flexibility. Of course, funds are needed to support our students through programs, resources, facilities, but much more importantly, where and how we spend it. While we do have restrictions in some regards, the flexibility that our Restart programs allow our schools has shown that where we spend our money can really make an impact on how that looks for our students day to day. This flexibility allowed quite a bit of assistance of putting IAs in every classroom. In her K-3, she had 2 IAs and the teacher. This not only helps our teachers, but it gives more one-on-one to each and every student. In her 4th and 5th grade classes, she also had an instructional assistant along with the teacher. They had high expectations and lots of support to come with plans to zone in on the needs of each and every student. I wanted to lift up Principal Stacy and her staff and their successes, and I know that she has a lot more successes to come, but it should be recognized that her high expectations, great leadership, and having the flexibility to provide that specialized need really could make a huge difference. So congratulations to Beaver Dam families. I look forward to seeing where they will go from here. I did want to acknowledge what you said about the HELPS program, because I know my own child was, when he was in 3rd grade, we had an amazing teacher. She had actually retired and came back to Wake County Public Schools in 3rd grade, and she was a literacy coach, and she used this program. And I was one of the volunteers to come in and help with the children, and I really saw the difference that it made on each and every one of those kids. It's an incredible program, and I am glad that we are using it all throughout Wake County Public Schools. A final reminder that our upcoming board advisory is on September 23rd, and we will be meeting with Dr. Taylor. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Caulfield. And we will turn it to our closer, Mr. Swanson, to conclude our board comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I believe that we have added an item to the Student Achievement Committee based on your remarks, so I will work with Dr. Wilson-Norman to make sure we incorporate that and take a deeper dive into this data that we saw. I thought Ms. Mahaffey was going to include this in her remarks. Yes, we had an opportunity this weekend to attend the Western Wake Band Day that featured Green Hope, Cary High, and Green Level High School. Such a great event to really highlight the arts. We often hear folks say, let's get back to the basics. Well, the basics often neglects the arts, where we see students thrive and shine and grow. So it's a great opportunity to engage with that and to see the great things. And hopefully next year, Dr. Taylor, I'll make sure I remind you to join us. It's such a great event. Also, I want to say happy HBCU week. Also, happy voter registration day and happy Constitutional Day. It's so befitting that we get to highlight all of those and talk about education. When this document was written, it was illegal for black folks at the time to be able to read, right? It was also illegal for women to have the right to vote. The part that in the Constitution I don't think is often talked about or can't be talked about in certain states because of legislation that is passed to present this alternative vision of America that's, in my opinion, a revisionist vision, because we can't acknowledge the future of our country without acknowledging the past and the pain that is deeply rooted into that. And, you know, it took the Reconstruction era, which happened about 100 years after the Constitution was written, to give us rights such as abolishing slavery, giving black men the right to vote, and all these other pieces that we are now seeing that is being attacked and being rewritten in history. And so I think it's a great reminder to get out and register to vote, but not just register to vote, go out and vote, because we are 30 days from the start of early voting. I also want to thank the North Carolina PTA and the North Carolina Public Schools first for putting together such a fabulous forum this weekend. I had the opportunity of watching how two individuals, one, I'll be mindful of my words, lay out their vision for what they want to do for North Carolina Public Schools. And, you know, I think it's befitting that we do some good digging. I think it's important to support those who believe in public schools, not those who call to abandon and dismantle the Constitution, to uproot lies and whatnot. So I think this November is going to be very critical. I think we have to not only register, but activate, come up with a plan to vote, and make sure that your voices are heard, because that is how democracy works, when all voices are able to access their voice at the ballot box and beyond. So come up with your plan. Don't just register, go vote, and make sure you tell 4 or 5 friends and family members to make sure they vote. And don't forget your ID. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanson. So that concludes our board comment section of the agenda. Next, we'll move to the items on our consent agenda. Board members have had an opportunity to review the items. Is there a motion at this time?
Chair Haggerty, I make a motion that we approve the items on the consent agenda.
We have a motion from Ms. Mahaffey to approve the items on the consent agenda, and we have a second from Ms. Edmonds. Is there any debate or discussion? All right, if not, we will go back to another roll call vote. So, looking online and making sure folks are available. Actually, we'll start in reverse order this time to give everyone a chance to come back. So, Ms. Caulfield? We're voting on the consent agenda.
Yes.
Thank you. So that was a yes. That was an aye. Okay.
I was going to say so moved, but I forgot.
No worries. All right. So that was a vote of aye. Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler.
Aye.
That's an aye. The chair votes aye. Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds. Aye. And Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
All right. By unanimous vote, all of the items on the consent agenda were approved and adopted. Next, we'll go to our action agenda, where we have 5 policy items before us today. The first is the proposed board policy 1810, a new policy on sustainability, here before us on first reading. Welcome, Mr. Burnett.
Thank you. Appreciate it. This is the first reading of Policy 1810, Sustainability. This item was first discussed at the May Policy Committee. Suggested changes were discussed at that time, and it was then presented at the September 3rd Board of Education work session. There was one adjustment, and that was incorporated. Board approval of the first reading is requested.
Okay. So board members, you did see this item in Policy Committee. We had good discussion. Mr. Burnett's presenting the item. At this point, do we have a motion just to begin discussion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Mahaffey. We have a second from Ms. Edmonds. So approval of the policy on first reading has been proposed. Are there any comments, any debate? I see Mr. Hershey, and then I'll come back to Ms. Edmonds and then Ms. Mahaffey. Mr. Hershey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just want to give credit to Ms. Mahaffey and to Chair Haggerty on their work on a sustainability policy. I know the chair has been wanting this for a number of years and talking about it. I'm happy to have helped push for this. I am very happy that to have worked with Ms. Mahaffey, our policy chair, on doing the work this year, going to NC State, having conversations, doing the research. And I want to thank also, the Wake Green Partnership group, who they let me meet with them every once in a while, and I'm very appreciative of their consistent push for this policy. I look forward to its implementation across our school system, and I just want to, this is a good, strong start for a sustainability policy, and I just appreciate Ms. Mahaffey and Chair Haggerty with their help on this.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey. Next, we'll go to Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you. When we have it for second reading, I'd like to request that it be on action versus consent. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So noted. Ms. Mahaffey?
I just want to recognize Mr. Burnett, Mr. Strickland, and their team, Dr. Crane. It is not easy to craft a policy out of thin air when multiple board members are throwing different ideas at you. And I want to thank the folks that were a part of the sustainability working group that Ms. Edmonds, Mr. Hershey, and I were able to be a part of. That was eye-opening on the different facets of sustainability. And so I look forward to this being a start as we move forward to being a more sustainable district and living up to that green ribbon district recognition that we earned a few years back. And being able to see Ms. Wood in carpool.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Other board members, any comment? Anyone else online? Ms. Caulfield?
I just kind of had a question, really, more. I think it's great that we actually have this policy, and we're kind of just showing, where we stand on it, and it's going to kind of be a base of how we operate. In the last paragraph where it says that we'll regularly monitor, just wanted to suggest that we actually put in how often we actually monitor it, just so we have a good sense of following up on the information and seeing if we need to tweak anything.
So that's a good question. What I'll do is I'll turn it over to Mr. Burnett and then Dr. Crane as well. In recapping the committee discussion, was there discussion about how often things could be monitored? Was there reasoning for the current language? Whatever you could share with us, because I know, like sharing Ms. Caulfield's point, obviously we want to monitor it as often as feasible, and I just didn't know if you all had some idea of what that was.
I guess a proposal could be that it's a report or a presentation is done annually. If you want it to be more frequent than that, we certainly can do that too.
Is that something we could put in rules and procedures, or would you, or like an internal document, or would that be something for policy? Is that, if you have a recommendation, I'll ask board members as well.
We could add it to that last section that it would be annually, if the board's good with that. If you have
In my work with our attorneys over the last several years, I have recognized that often the word regularly is inserted instead of a specific time frame, so that it allows staff to put in an RMP. When we get a report that when we identify those parameters and those items, then we can identify a reporting cadence or timeline. But to put the word regularly in there does state that there will be a report, it will happen regularly, but does leave that specificity to an RMP. If the board would like the specificity of an annual report in the policy, we can certainly do that and then build that even annually or more frequently in the RMP. But at minimally annually, we can put that in the policy if you'd like. Am I good on that, Mr. Malone? Is that fair? Okay.
Okay. Is that anything we want to address now, or do we want to think about it? Ms. Evans has asked that this come back for action, and so we could take some time if we wanted to before voting on a final, or we could do anything with it tonight or not. Ms. Mahaffey?
My understanding was that there needed to be some base level monitoring and understanding what our metrics and systems were, which was why, as Dr. Crane said, putting the regularly in. What we can do, Mr. Strickland, Superintendent Taylor, is maybe in a year get a report, whether it's in facilities or a work session, or bring back the policy to know what metrics you all have and figure out what that reporting schedule will look like.
So we are excited about this too. What we would like to do is establish the metrics that we want to measure. Let's make sure they are good, that they apply to the work that we want to do, and then we can determine the best frequency of how we report that back to the board. That's kind of what we're thinking through now. If we leave it at regularly, that says we will do something once a year, but as we dive into it and get into the specifics, it could be that we do things every 6 months, every quarter. We just want to look at the metrics, but we do need to gather the data first.
Okay, any further thoughts or comments on that? All right. I'll check Just online again, just to make sure anyone online had any comments. All right, so again, as referenced by Mr. Hershey, this has been several years of work and labor by board members who are here at this table and board members who came before us. And so it is always very satisfying, very, very meaningful when we get to see it come to fruition. I want to acknowledge everyone's contributions who has worked on this. I know that, oftentimes we might get policies recommended to us, like by the state association or required by state law or federal law. And this is one that we were putting together, customized for Wake County. And I know that takes a lot of work, and appreciate everyone's dedication, everyone's thoughts and research on this, putting this together. So I just want to express my gratitude for everything you've done to get us to this point, to have the policy presented before us tonight, the work of our policy committee and its leadership, and having the discussions and getting us to this point. And I think this is the right thing to do, and I think we will see good things come out of this. And as board members have suggested, this is a first step, and we'll continue to evaluate, continue to see where it can grow, can see how it should evolve and grow, based on our needs and based on the data we collect. So I just wanted to give those comments and thank you all. So we do have a motion on the table from Ms. Mahaffey, seconded by Ms. Edmonds. If there's no other comment, we'll begin our roll call vote. All right. First, we'll start with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds.
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler. Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
And Ms. Caulfield.
Aye.
All right, by unanimous vote, the bill has passed first reading and will return to us on the action agenda at our next meeting for second reading. Thank you both. All right, our second policy that we're considering tonight is proposed board policy 7425 on first reading. I believe Dr. Mutilla will present.
Thank you, Chair Haggerty, and just to give a brief overview of the four policies I have before going into each individually. I am bringing policy 7425, 7440, 7811, and 7815. We presented all of these at the August 27th Policy Committee meeting, and again, I'll review them individually. Just a reminder, tonight, these are all Model School Board Association policies. So what you see in the black font is the Model School Board Association policy. Blue font is staff revisions to that policy, which often includes us bringing over existing policy language. Green font just represents moving language within the same policy, and then the yellow highlighted language is new language that we've added since the administrator contracts. Bringing this for first reading. Once adopted, it would replace the following policies in the old manual: 2010 for school administrator contract and 2021 for retention, renewal, and career status. During the policy committee, we highlighted staff changes to the model policy and added provisions from our current policy and practices. I think we agreed upon language during the committee meeting, so tonight we are requesting the board's approval of the first reading of policy 7425.
Thank you, Dr. Mutillo. Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion for Ms. Mahaffey. Is there a second? Second for Ms. Edmonds. All right. Are there any questions for Dr. Mutillo about the policy? Any comments by the board about this proposed policy? Oops, sorry. I lost my online image, just checking to see. Okay. None from our online members. All right, then. At this point, we'll proceed to a vote. We'll start with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds? Aye. Ms. Mahaffey?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
And Ms. Caulfield? Aye. All right, by unanimous vote, the policy has been approved for first reading and will turn to the board for second reading.
Great.
Next, in the parade of personnel, we have proposed policy 7440.
Yeah, so policy 7440 for assignments, reassignments, and transfers. This is the one I probably have the most to present on because we left it a little open-ended with us to come back and try to reconcile some discussion from the policy committee meeting. But once approved, it would replace the following policies in the old manual: 3320 and 3321 for employee-initiated transfers and employer-initiated transfers, as well as 3300 for transfers. So if you'll recall from the policy committee meeting, we did have a discussion centered on section B, which was employee-initiated transfers during the school year. And the board wanted us to look at some consistent timelines as well as some consistent criteria for some of those timelines. So we talked a bit about potentially 30-day timeline or a 60-day timeline, went back and talked with the HR team as well as some other folks to try to bring back a recommendation to capture both the concerns around consistency of timeline in a transfer outside the transfer window during the school year, as well as some criteria that's specific and in policy that will allow for an extension beyond the timeline. So you can see that language highlighted in your materials in yellow, but I'll go ahead and read it as well for those in the public who don't have access to those materials. So this talks about teachers, instructional assistants, and clerical staff, and says must receive permission from the principal unless the position is an increase in salary. And here's the highlighted language. And the employee's principal and the prospective principal must agree upon the date of the employee's release, which will be no later than 30 days from the date the transfer is approved by Human Resources, except if, 1, the transfer will create a vacancy that occurs during the final 2 weeks of a semester, or 2, the transfer will create a vacancy that occurs during or immediately preceding mandatory testing. 3, there is not an available qualified replacement or substitute employee for the transferring employee. Or 4, releasing the employee will have a detrimental impact on instruction. And employees whose release date is delayed must be released no later than 60 days from the date of the transfer is approved by Human Resources. And again, this was our attempt to capture the discussion at the committee table and bring forward a recommendation to you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Mutillo. I'll go first, just to keep with the protocol. Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion from Ms. Mahaffey. Is there a second? Second from Ms. Edmonds. Is there any discussion about this policy or any questions following up our discussion from Policy Committee? Ms. Edmonds.
So if I remember correctly, I think Mr. Swanson and Ms. Caulfield had the most comments or feedback about this highlighted section, and so I just wanted to know, does this kind of capture what you were looking for?
Mr. Swanson?
So I'll say it's an attempt. It's a yes and no. But I also understand, being in the classroom, that there are certain time frames that is not convenient for transfer. So I will concede to that, but I also appreciate the attempt to really come up with some happy medium. I think the concern that I had raised was, if a teacher is requesting that transfer, sometimes teachers need a fresh start. Sometimes they need a change of scenery, just like our students. And I think we should try to find 30 days, which was, I think, was the suggested language, to agree upon and let that be a peaceful transfer. So therefore, it helps our retention, our recruitments, and whatnot. So I think it is a great start. So I will, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. And Ms. Caulfield?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Swanson. The 30 days, I like that that's in there. The only concern I had, and I think this is what you were referring to, is unless there was not somebody to replace them, so that kind of pins them back to the 60 days. But I do agree that some of the other stuff that's in there is necessary around testing and everything, because then it does affect the students. So I do think it's a fair compromise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any other comments, any other questions? Okay, if not, we will proceed to a roll call vote on proposed board policy 7440 on assignments and reassignment transfers. All right, we'll start with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds. Aye. Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler. Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
and Ms. Caulfield.
Aye.
All right, by unanimous vote, policy is passed on first reading and will be brought back to the board for second reading. Next on the list, proposed board policy 7811, plans for growth and improvement of licensed employees.
All right, next policy. Again, for first reading, once adopted, this policy would replace the following policies in the old manual: 2233 and 3233, certified employee improvement plans. As discussed in policy committee, the details of the different plans the district uses to help employees improve performance. I think we agreed upon the language during the policy committee. There was some discussion as we sought to streamline the policy and remove some components that the specificity of those might be lost. So the board had talked about us ensuring that we provided direction to supervisors on different improvement strategies, how to choose the correct plan. So we are starting to review our content on Wake Connect, and the performance team is augmenting what's out there just to make sure that anything that was removed to streamline the policy is not lost in terms of guidance for supervisors. So tonight we're requesting the board's approval of the first reading of policy 7811.
Thank you, Dr. Mutillo. Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion for Ms. Mahaffey. Is there a second? We have a second for Ms. Edmonds. Are there any questions for Dr. Mutillo about the policy? Any comments from board members? Again, we did have a thorough discussion of the policy in policy committee. All right. Then we will have a roll call vote on the proposed policy. We'll start with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds?
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler?
Aye.
That was an aye from Ms. Johnson, from Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler. We have Mr. Swanson
Aye.
and Ms. Caulfield.
Aye.
All right, by unanimous vote, proposed board policy 7811 has passed on first reading and will be brought back to the board for second reading. And the final policy I have is board policy 7815, evaluation of non-licensed employees.
Thank you, Chair Hagerty. Yes, last policy for this evening. Once adopted, this policy would replace policy 4230, evaluation of support employees. Staff has taken the model policy and added statement from current board policy about the timing of evaluations, and also added language to be consistent with the evaluation of licensed employees, the one that we just reviewed. So tonight we request the board's approval for the first reading of policy 7815, evaluation of non-licensed employees.
Thank you, Dr. Mutillo. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion for Ms. Mahaffey. Is there a second? Second for Ms. Edmonds. Are there any questions for Dr. Mutillo? Any comments from board members?
All part of the migration.
All part of the migration. Again, we had a very full policy committee agenda, and we're just moving these along.
Sorry.
All right, then. We'll move, if there are no questions, we'll move to a vote on first reading. We'll start with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds?
Aye.
Ms. Mahaffey?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler?
Aye.
The Vice Chair votes aye. Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
And Ms. Caulfield? All right, so we have unanimous approval of proposed board policy 7815, which is passed on first reading and will return to the board for second reading.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Mutillo.
Thank you all.
All right. So now, I want to thank all of our remaining speakers for their patience as we've continued with our business agenda. We'll now return to our public comment portion, hearing from members who signed up to speak to items that were off agenda. And so our first speaker for this portion of public comment will be Joseph Deaton, and Mr. Deaton will be followed by Bailey Butler. Good evening, Mr. Deaton, and again, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. At recent meetings, I asked the board not to include gender identity in anti-discrimination policy because this will require social transition by schools. The overwhelming majority of those who are socially transitioned then go on medical treatments, whereas the majority would outgrow gender dysphoria if not socially transitioned. puberty blockers are usually the first medical treatment that follows. The World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, in version 8 of their standard of care, still claim that puberty blockers give adolescents time to think about their gender. But this claim is not credible when 96 to 98% of those on puberty blockers go on to cross-sex hormones. WPATH SOC8 repeats the debunked claim that puberty blockers are fully reversible and then contradict themselves by admitting adverse impacts on bone density and brain development. WPATH's solution to these problems is now to recommend to proceeding on to cross-sex hormones before the age of 16. Cross-sex hormones cause irreversible changes in sex characteristics, but curiously, SOC8 calls the effects partially reversible. In addition to causing atrophy of reproductive organs and loss of fertility, cross-sex hormones increase rates of heart attack, cardiovascular disease, blood disorders, and cancer. SOC8 goes into detail about which varieties of hormones should be avoided based on family history and pre-existing conditions, assuming that these are known or manifest for young patients. SOC8 admits they do not eliminate risk, but recommend hormone treatments to supposedly improve mental health. But the CAS review for NHS England found that those short-term studies were low quality and the claims unreliable. The harmful effects of puberty blockers and hormones go back to social transition in schools. You are putting extremely troubled and vulnerable young people on a one-way conveyor belt, whereas most would outgrow dysphoria if left alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deaton. Our next speaker is Bailey Butler. And I believe Mr. Baylog, is he here? I don't see him. If not, then following Ms. Butler would be Zachary Bess. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Hi, I'm a resident of the Pearson Farm neighborhood in Apex, and I'm here to respectfully ask the board to reconsider the 2025 to 2026 student assignment that directly impacts Pearson Farms and Ashley Downs. Let me start by saying I fully understand Olive Chapel Elementary has been an overcrowded school for many years, and I recognize the school district must relieve that pressure. Pearson Farms is 0.6 miles away from OCE, and Ashley Downs is 900 feet. So we have driven through the intersections where parents pick up and drop off their students during school hours, and we know how bad the traffic is. We also know our principal, Miss May, faculty, and staff are doing truly a remarkable and a likely incredibly taxing job meeting the needs of a large number of students. I acknowledge rezoning schools is an effective strategy in resolving these issues, and many communities are and have been impacted due to the enormous growth in Wake County. My concern for Pearson Farms and Ashley Downs revolves around the lack of calendar consistency offered to our children by the current proposal. Our families are being asked to transition school calendars 4 times without any other options or support. We are also being asked to fund childcare for calendars, breaking 2 distinct calendars, often within the same year, or risk losing access to public transportation. This will create further financial stress on residents already meeting the demands of growing property taxes and rapidly rising home prices. Some of our community members attended the virtual call yesterday seeking clarity to see what options we currently have. From my understanding, the key takeaways were, 1, our specific community has a robust stability transfer option for our children to remain at OCE, and 2, Parkside Middle School will open in 2026, and the board isn't considered middle school realignment until this school is open. Offering a robust stability transfer is greatly appreciated. I know it's not something that's strictly in accordance with your policies, so I do appreciate that. Ultimately, you're asking us to go to Balcom, but our community is struggling to make decisions between a stability transfer or Balcom because of the uncertainty of the middle school alignment, one of which mentioned yesterday could possibly be impacted by the pending Park School Middle School opening. Additionally, you cannot give us any reassurance that future students in our community will receive the same calendar consistency options. Therefore, it is hard to feel confident in the proposal that ultimately is relying on something that might happen. I believe there are solutions that align closer to the 4 pillars of the student assignment, other than relocating our students to a school on conflicting calendar schedules that is 13 times the distance away from our current school. And our community would be eager to work with the school board to help navigate the possible solutions. I am running out of time. In conclusion, I'm kindly asking the school board to keep our small population of students of Pearson Farms down at OCE. If that's not possible, please wait until the impacts of Parkside Middle School are fully realized. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Butler. Again, last chance for Mr. Baylog. I don't believe he's here, but just in case he's out of the room. All right, then we'll proceed. Zachary Bess will be followed by Kenneth Butler. Good evening.
Good evening. I think I would have tied it to the Constitution if I'd known how long I was going to be here. I love tools for schools. I've got a whole laundry list of things to talk about. I stood up here 3 years ago and then again 2 years ago talking about how unaffordable it is to live in this county and teach in this county. At the time, I lived in Durham, and I looked and looked and looked and looked in Wake, and I bought in Johnston because I cannot afford to live in this county where I teach. That is beyond frustrating. I'll say that I was this close looking at Johnson County schools, and lucky for everybody, you all passed master's pay, and then I was like, all right, I guess I'll stay around, because that gave me an option. Because as much as I'd love to become a board-certified teacher, if I move states, that isn't going to do anything for me, because we are the only state that seems to care about it, and masters will take me in every single state. So, while I eventually plan to become board-certified if I stay here, masters is the one that I wanted to prioritize. Additionally, I wanted to say that while we talk about bus drivers, we talk about a lot of support staff, we talk about teachers, I think some of the other support roles, like speech and physical and occupational therapy, often gets left out. Am I biased? Absolutely. My wife just graduated from Duke University with her doctorate of occupational therapy, and the $250 she will get for having a doctorate from Duke is laughable when my master's, that I'm paying nothing for, will completely change how much I'm making a month, twice as much as her doctorate from the university, where the AOTA is transitioning to being a doctoral-only position, and that's what we're paying the position. Very frustrating. I have so many things I want to say. We've talked about a lot of holidays. One we haven't talked about is Banned Book Week next week. And I just want to say a lot of people up here talking about the word liberty and freedom, but I want to say that hopefully we can stand for the freedom to read what we have available to us and not restrict people in the name of liberty and freedom. Most importantly, I wanted to say thank you all for, I've seen so many of your faces around the leadership academies. I'm in the middle of some of that mess, and I appreciate how much was talked about during the work meeting today. That's one of the reasons I wanted to come and support it. I did have, my biggest concern, I think, is that the staff of these schools have not been as involved as they can. I understand the policy complications. I understand that everyone's not going to get what they want, especially with potentially having a third school. And I just wanted to say, I think I see a lot of potential issues with having a high school split across 3 campuses, including the 2 previous campuses, plus the new campus at Shaw University. I don't think I have a perfect solution. I just think that space is already an issue on our campus. I would love to see you all consider contracting additional space at Governor Moorhead School. A lot has been talked about spending. I teach in a 100-year-old building, mold and cracks, and all of those things are regular for me. Thank you for everything. Bye.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kenneth Butler, who will be followed by David Smythe.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chair Haggerty and the board. I'm another concerned resident of Pearson Farm, here to advocate against the rezoning plan for 2025 and 2026. These are neighborhood school. I mean, as my wife said, it's 900 feet away. Ashley Downs is 900 feet away. I think there's a lot of benefit to going to, especially at elementary school, going to the school that's close to your house. Our community would be divided if you allowed some students to stay at Olive Chapel Elementary School and some students to go to Bockham. So I didn't want to just come up here with some baseless claims. I did a little bit of research. First, I'll briefly go through them. First one is a paper called How Do They Get There? It's by Schlossenberg et al. It was published in Planning Practice and Research. And he goes on to say that school sprawl as a result of rezoning has numerous negative effects, the first being reduction in exercise of the students. Less students are going to walk to school. It's not going to impact us, but future residents of Pearson Farm and Ashley Down will lose that ability to walk to their local school. Higher traffic congestion, as was mentioned, and dependency on cars, which is worse for the environment. The next one, let's see. So this is the relationship between students' sense of their school as a community, sense of their school as a community, and involvement in problem behavior. So this was by Batachich et al., published in the American Journal of Public Health. And the proposed rezone is going to divide our community, as mentioned. So some students will be going to Bockham, some to Olive Chapel. I think the students will have a reduced sense of community if that happens. The third one here, do children who move home and school frequently have poor education outcomes in their early years at school? This is by Hutchings et al. In PLOS 1, and basically just said that moving schools is bad for academic performance kind of across the board. The more they move, the worse it is. So those were the three studies that I looked up in relation to this. On this Constitution Day, Ms. Mahaffey, Mr. Swanson, I think you made a great point that the right to public school is enshrined in the North Carolina Constitution, and that it's ultimately, the right is funded by taxpayers. So we are concerned taxpayers that our children being moved are not going to have the best form of education. And, really our question to the board is, these issues that we brought up, the traffic congestion, environmental impact, lower chance of exercise for future students, increased problem behaviors, and work academic performance, are going to be justified to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. All right, next up, David Smith. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is David Smith. I have a ninth grader at Enloe High School. I applied for bus transportation for her this year. I missed the application deadline. On August 29th, I received an email that said, "We are working to provide service as soon as possible. A customer service representative will contact you when your student is able to ride the bus." No one contacted me. Today I called and I learned that she will not get a spot on the bus unless someone drops out or a new route is added. Both of those possibilities seem exceedingly unlikely to me. My daughter is essentially being denied bus service for the entire year. And my question is this district policy to limit bus service this way this year?
We can't go back and forth and engage, but I can follow up with you after.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll just ask rhetorically, how many other students are in this position? And if I had applied on the last day, what would the outcome have been? And the relevant statute seems to refer to a hearing process, and I would like to know what that hearing process is. I did send you an email earlier today, so if you could respond to that.
Great. And if you're willing to stick around a minute after public comment, we can have a word with you and also direct you to staff too before you go home.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And so that will conclude our public comment period. So at this point, the only item left on our agenda is our closed session discussion and then having to come out of closed session to report back. So at this point, I will entertain any motions.
Mr. Chair, I move that we return to closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Is there a second? We have a second from Ms. Mahaffey. Again, this will be a roll call vote, so before you pack up, we'll need to pull up everybody and go through our order. All right, I see Mr. Hershey is available online, so we'll start down there. This is the motion to move into closed session.
Aye.
Mr. Hershey? Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds? Aye. Ms. Mahaffey?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler?
Aye.
Vice Chair votes aye. Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
And Ms. Caulfield. All right, everyone, we will adjourn, transition to closed session. Thank you very much. Good night, all.